Today's episode is brought to you by our company, NanoChomp Marketing Strategy and Analytics. We help product and marketing teams solve problems and experience growth using data and approachable AI. Visit nanochomp.com to learn more.
Hey everyone, on today's episode of Soundbites, we have Andrei Oprisan. Andrei is a technology leader with over 15 years of experience in software engineering, AI, and machine learning. He's held leadership roles at brands you've probably heard of, like Wayfair and Hubspot, and is currently the engineering lead at Agent.AI. Agent.AI is transforming the way people hire solutions by creating a marketplace for AI agents. Andrei, welcome to the pod.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Well, the way we like to typically start these is, tell us about your background. What got you started? What got you on the path to where you are today?
Yeah, so I've always been a tinkerer, someone who likes to take things apart, put them back together, figure out how they really work. So over time, I gravitated more towards technology, towards computers, because you can, in that world, sort of build whatever you come up with, whatever limits of your imagination you can sort of push. And I found that really appealing. So I started early days sort of building websites, building games, and then went to school to study computer science, also graduate degree in machine learning, and more recently switched a bit more to the business side, just completing my executive MBA now at MIT to really figure out how do we properly bridge the technology with the business, especially in this rapidly changing world with AI. What is the role of work? What is the role of a person? What is the role of AI, right? And how do we make the most positive impact in that world as it continues to evolve, as well as helping companies navigate this and figure out what that needs to look like and their evolution, right? These companies are struggling to handle the changes that are coming at them, what their competition is doing and such. So very fascinating, but I've come up as an engineer. I've been that kind of hands-on developer since early days of my career back at Wayfair, early days when company was much smaller. Now it's a multi tens of billions of dollars company in Boston. But I remember when we were back in the office in Back Bay, and I was developer number 30. The whole company was I don't know 50, 60 people. So very different days back then, versus what it is now, and actually boomerang back. So I'll talk a little bit about that. It's always good to leave everything on good terms, right, and never burn bridges. That's one of my lessons over the years. You never know. The world is small, and the tech world is even smaller, especially in a city like Boston. But yeah, my background is in technology. I started at Wayfair. I moved on afterwards to do more e-commerce consulting, trying to figure out how do we not only build technology solutions and build features themselves. I owned a lot of the checkout capabilities and baby and wedding registries and gift cards. So everybody sort of had a lot of ownership back in the day, and I wanted to figure out how do we build different kinds of e-commerce solutions for different kinds of clients, such as Coca-Cola, Nestle. When I was a tech lead at Emmer & McCann, one of the big sort of digital agencies that were helping these companies figure out how do we launch in different kinds of markets. How do we scale the not only the front end experience that most people see, but what does that back office look like? What are the operational pieces, warehouse management, catalog management, pricing, marketing, et cetera? So there's a lot of moving pieces, and I wanted to learn more about all of those. And so I did that for a few years, and then I landed at HubSpot, where I ran HubSpot Labs, the R&D part of the company, essentially experimenting with new technology, figuring out how do we build those products. My actual title there was a product entrepreneur. Essentially trying to figure out how do we launch new products internally? How do we do that in a way that helps the company stay more competitive? And we build things like a social network for marketers and salespeople. Not exactly core, right, to the HubSpot product itself in terms of email marketing and tools for sales agents to really use and become more effective. but really building that larger moat around the company, around the ecosystem, by building a community. What does that look like? How do we, not only evangelize inbound marketing, but also help people get better, at different parts of their job and different parts of their skill set over time, right? So that was a lot of what inbound.org was. We grew that to over 250,000 monthly active users, and then we handed it over to some other core teams. So once our projects matured, and we had to essentially give away our baby to say, okay, now here's our forever home. We're here to really incubate. We're here really to help figure out what works fast, what fails fast, and go on to the next idea. And then afterwards, I worked at Liberty Mutual. I wanted a very different kind of experience, and that's it. Going from HubSpot and these other past companies to a company like Liberty Mutual, Fortune 60, insurance, a lot more corporate, but really interesting problem where they were looking to go through a digital transformation. And I was brought on board to lead that transformation for all of their customer-facing tech. So they said, okay, we've got an aging tech stack. We don't have any tech people in Boston where the headquarters is. We've got over 10,000 other folks here, lawyers and all the business decision makers. We don't have any IT, as they called it. We don't have any product and engineering. How do we even do that? How do we hire at scale? So within those 2 years, hired over 200 people,
Wow.
product and other engineering, product engineering sort of functions, to figure out, okay, how do we not only build the right kind of culture if we want to really be competitive with all the insurtechs and startups out there, but also change the entire tech stack, the architecture, to go from on-premise and old school sort of experiences with I think the most advanced front end there was more just static HTML and jQuery, versus let's move to React, let's move to microservices, serverless, move everything to the cloud, versus again some of these very large data centers and a mainframe still powering most of that back end. So I was responsible for the customer facing technology, the main website, libertymutual.com, the mobile apps, the sales channels, again, all online. If you were to buy Liberty Mutual insurance online, that was us, reimagining that entire process and really going at it with a different perspective, very much design thinking, design orientation, to say, who is the actual customer and what do they really want today in this kind of market, in this competitive sort of landscape, versus what it used to be, where we think it is. Again, rapid iteration, MVP. And that was a fun journey. And then afterwards, I boomeranged to Wayfair, where I came back to run our sales technology teams and scaled out the platform that enabled B2B and B2C sales channels. So the sales agent sort of assisted capabilities for things like renovations. If you're renovating your kitchen, you don't want to just, add a fridge and a sink and countertops and cabinets to cart and check out. You may also need design services and a plumber and an actual, designer who understands, is that even the right thing to buy, and contractors to actually install it, and painters, right in the whole sort of package. So we built that kind of capability for Wayfair, extending on top of the core stack, which is very much direct consumer. It's really optimized for, you buy a rug, you buy a lamp, you buy a couch, not some of these larger projects. And the sales agent sort of assisted element of, how do we price things? What kind of freedom do they have to be able to price things a little bit differently and package it up? Selling to schools and governments is very different than, you and I buying something, right? In terms of logistics and payments and things like that.
Like, when you came back to it, it's a completely different company from when you left, right? With probably all different pieces. It's a completely different animal. Even the culture has got to be different. And then the task you were performing and solving, completely different to the company you left. We'll touch back on a little bit of that, but that's probably just a fascinating transition that I think is worth chatting about.
Yep. Yeah, no, absolutely. And again, it evolved, tremendously. We can deep dive into that anytime. But afterwards, I caught I've always had this entrepreneurial bug, but we said, okay, this is sort of the right time. So some early HubSpot employees and I got together, and we were looking at online advertising. As we know, online advertising has only gotten more expensive over time. It's only harder to properly target customers in a price efficient way. And so we're looking at it. Myself and two other folks, Sam and Greg, we are at different companies, but we're all sort of running or responsible in different ways for the customer acquisition part. And saying, man, there's got to be a better way to do this. Digital works. We know it works. We've done it our entire lives. But what else is there? And how can we get, the same impact, but, at a lower price point? And that's where we did a bunch of research, and we found something called out-of-home advertising, which is essentially real world advertising, things like billboards and bus shelters and buses. You can print stuff all over them. You can get planes on Miami Beach with a banner. You can get, again, boats and bicycles, right, with advertisements. You can even sponsor ice cream trucks that
Oh,
go
wow.
to a little league, game, right? To maybe the right audience is there, the parents. You can even sponsor trash cans, right, all over essentially any city in the U.S. So there's actually thousands of mediums that make up out of home, thousands of different, I think over 4,000 different types of mediums like that. And we found out there wasn't really a unified technology solution that essentially put all that together and made it as approachable, as measurable as digital advertising. So you could say, you know what, here's my audience. Here are traits of my audience, some kind of attributes that you're looking for. Where are those people, right? How can I get the right message in front of them at the right time? So you can do online. We know how that works. Keywords, there's some additional filters in terms of behaviors and demographics. You can get those ads on Facebook and Instagram and TikTok, etc. But for offline, there wasn't really anything there. So we built this platform that started with a marketplace where we indexed all of this out-of-home advertising. It's all real estate, essentially. So you do need to have permits in all the different counties and cities where you have these kinds of advertisements. Then every locale is a little bit different. The actual locales govern how and what you can actually advertise. And there are states, for example, like Hawaii, or in Maine, where you cannot have any billboards. It's just banned by law, right? So
Mhm.
every single locale, every single state is completely different, and figuring all that out is obviously fairly challenging. So we automated it. We figured out, okay, how do we get the most real time inventory of out of home advertising, and then how do we make it targetable, right? How can we say, okay, great, now we understand the kinds of billboards and where most of the inventory is essentially billboards across the US, but many others that are much more price effective. And then we built a data platform that helped us understand, if you're looking to target certain kind of population with certain, behaviors and location data profiles, then here's where you find those people. For example, if you're describing myself, dog lover, we have a dog, we have a toddler, and we eat organic food, and I run marathons, right? If you're looking for people like me, you're not looking for me, but you're looking for people like me to be able to maybe sell organic dog food, right? Or, children's organic, I don't know, clothes or something like that. Then you would try to figure out, okay, what makes, me, right? Like, what are those attributes and what do they mean? And how do we create the right personas and say, okay, there's 8,000 Andres, real numbers, in the US, right? And if you want that kind of population because you're trying to sell something at a certain price point, here's where they are. Here's the kind of advertisement that you should put in front of them. Here's, by the way, my rough kind of schedule in terms of maybe I take the dog to the park, and where is the nearest dog park? Maybe I take my kid to school, and where is that? What is my journey? What are the potential touch points? So then put some advertisers in front of you. That's what we built at scale. And 4 years later, and 50 plus employees and 10 million plus of funding and of revenue as well. I exited the company as one of the co-founders and CTO, to work on Agent.AI. So awesome journey there. Still an
Yeah, really
advisor for
cool.
the company, and really wanted to build more things in this agentic world that I think is evolving very, very quickly. And that's where I'm rejoining Dharmesh Shah, who is a co-founder of HubSpot, and who is sponsoring this project essentially, to make this into a real thing. And so, what exactly it's going to look like in the future, TBD. But our goal is to make agentic AI as approachable as possible to build, as accessible as possible in terms of finding the right kinds of agents, and making it so that anybody can build AI agents without needing to know how to code. You don't need to be a developer. You don't need a data science or machine learning background. None of those things should be barriers. And we're just trying to make it so easy for builders to build those agents, and for users to find the right kind of agent to help them in their day-to-day, to help them automate tasks and get more work done.
So we have a lot of clients that are doing something not doing something similar, but we're helping them deploy agents to take some of their workflows that are definable and then let a robot do it. But for the people that are not AI nerds, can you define what an agent is and what agentic AI is now that we have this great world of large language models to help us?
Right. Yeah. So I would say, and again, there's some debate on the definitions here. Feel free to check me, but agents are really semi-autonomous systems that can use a number of tools to accomplish tasks. So the reason why I say semi-autonomous, they're not fully autonomous, right? They can't do any sort of open-ended task. They also use tools, and so they can only use the kinds of tools they give them access to. Things like Google search, right? If you want to search something, to do research or search the news, or maybe look up some data from some internal company documents, those are the kinds of tools that you would give an agent access to. And agentic AI is sort of the term for this kind of AI that over time is going to be able to ingest more data, use more tools, and operate within certain guidelines, certain parameters that are given to it. And that may mean, using one or multiple LLMs. LLMs, these large language models, they're really the brain right behind the operation. They're the ones that you're giving some instruction, or everybody I'm sure has used ChatGPT or equivalent kind of systems, and you're just chatting with them. You're saying what you want, and then you're getting some kind of answer. Now, in that agentic sort of world, you may use one LLM or multiple ones. They all have strengths and weaknesses. They all have different price points and kinds of limitations. The Geminis of the world from Google have much larger context windows, for example, right? So you can give it a lot more data to process in just one shot. I think 10 times more, for example, than ChatGPT. Anthropic is twice as big context window wise, roughly, as the OpenAI models, right? So again, there's some trade-offs in terms of some of them can code a little bit better than others. Some of them can plan a little bit better than others as well. Some of them are really fast in terms of maybe processing data and getting some kind of structured outputs. And so it's a matter of, okay, which LLMs to use, what are the right kinds of prompts, the right kinds of constraints, the right kinds of safety rules to apply as well. And then what are the right kinds of tools to give them access to accomplish a goal. And again, those tools can be as simplistic as some of the ones that we've talked about, or these could be tools that the agents themselves build given the need, and says, what, it looks like we don't have that tool in our arsenal. What about we build, I don't know, a plotting, a 3D plotting kind of library, or use an existing one to be able to give you, it sounds like, you want from this file, this Excel file, to maybe build a 3D plot, right? So how will we do that? How do I show you the results? Like, let's actually build the thing that is that necessary, right? So those kinds of capabilities is what, agentic AI would enable.
I think like when you think about which use cases make the most sense immediately, Lauren and I talk about this a lot. It's like, is the task definable and is the outcome predictable based on executing that series of tasks? Like if you can define it and it's repeatable, that's probably a good target. And you mentioned looking at a spreadsheet and creating a graph. We have a lot of use cases, from our corporate world too, where you've got a corporate cockpit meeting, whether it's for sales or with your CEO, whatever it is, but it's weekly. And when you looked at the amount of time it took preparing for that cockpit meeting, it was extreme. But if you have and it was a standard workflow, it's like you're looking at this report, you're looking at this report, you're putting a PowerPoint together, you're looking at this graph, this
Right.
graph, and this graph. It's very rules based, but it's white collar manual labor. It's rules based. Like that's a great tool to get 85% of the way there using an agentic AI tool where the workflow, you have a trigger, it enters the workflow, it performs the action, it queries the tool set that it needs. It might need to look into Oracle to pull some data. It might need to pull in data from a corporate spreadsheet that should be in a database, but somehow lives across a shared spreadsheet. And then it creates all the beautiful arts and charts so you can clip them and put them into a PowerPoint presentation versus going in and being a ninja with pivot tables all day long, right? Like I think
Right.
use cases like that make a lot of sense. There's tons of them. Like anything rules based makes sense. And what you guys are building, not only are you deploying your own agents, but you're creating a marketplace for them, which is unique in the space right now.
That's right. Yeah, and it's really about that marketplace. Ultimately, we're seeding it with a few agents ourselves that we think are useful, that we also know and understand fairly well in the space of marketing and sales and customer service. But ultimately, this is all about the builders. This is all about how do we create the right kinds of incentives for builders, for essentially what is going to be the next generation of an app store, where there's a real incentive for you as a builder to go build the next best agent, just like there was or is, for the Apple and Google app stores. You're going to get more users. You can charge them. You can learn from their behaviors and continue to put something out that's really amazing that you're really good at building. Right, as a builder, you need all these kinds of tools, and you need the growth stack to be able to say, how do I grow my business, right? If I'm going to build these agents, how do I reach out to them? How do I market to them? How do I understand their behaviors to be able to build the next version, right? How do I handle the payment side of it and actually get money into my account? If you're a creator, you just want to create. You want to do more of what you're really great at, and that's our goal. Our goal is to make that as seamless as possible.
I think you mentioned when you were first talking about Agent.AI, you said what it will be is sort of TBD, right? We're still figuring that out. What excites you about the future? Like what gets you kind of up in the morning every day and making whatever that is TBD? Like what motivates you?
Yeah, I think the thing that makes me the most excited about this project and gets me up every day is just seeing what our builders build every day. The kinds of use cases are so creative, and also kind of the bug reports and everything else. That, like, how could you break it in that way? Like, that's amazing. But it's really all about learning from them, and they tell us all these different kinds of use cases that we never even thought about. That changes, the kinds of actions that we add into the builder and how we're thinking about extending this to be able to build more advanced capabilities like multi-agent workflows, right? And all sorts of decision engines to be able to say, okay, it's not only this one agent or this other agent that I'm going to use. Eventually, we believe that the future is going to look like, AI coworkers in some fashion that need to be coordinated, that need to be, given some level of instruction, some parameters in terms of what they need to do, some success parameters as well, right? I mean, the entire benchmarking aspect, and what is right, what is correct, and how do you get more of it? To me, that's super interesting and exciting to figure out, what we build there. And the reason why I say, who knows what it's going to look like? I mean, this space is changing so fast every single day. We believe it's still going to be Agent.AI will still be a marketplace of some kind, right? Where we're trying to create more liquidity, essentially, and more visibility in terms of these AI agents, create more visibility for the builders and create more liquidity overall, so that there's more reason for builders to build AI agents, so that people can then use them to do real work. Now, again, how do we measure those things? How do we quantify them in a very repeatable way, and create the right kind of incentives across the board, especially if you want to live in a world that is also pro worker, right? As we think about,
Yeah.
okay, we believe, yes, all of us do a whole lot of work on a day-to-day basis that could be automated, should be, and what does that look like? Or how does it get augmented even more to create even more skills as a worker, right? To be able to say, okay, how do I learn different kinds of things faster than I used to in the past? And what does that need to look like? And all of that, I think, is enabled by AI agents. I think it's just a matter of crafting the right kind of marketplace, the right kind of environment, and the right incentive structures.
Yeah, I think there's a lot there that's really interesting. And I think, from a computer science perspective, this kind of thing has been interesting for 10, 15 years, right? But then the reality of it, and you talk about how quickly the world's changing. We're about 24 months into it being really reality, where like there's a democratization of tools where you don't need to know how to create an adversarial generative network. You don't need to know how to
Right.
create neural networks to be able to do this. You can build on the blocks that already exist to create immense solutions. You talked about AI coworkers. Um, and something you'd mentioned in one of our pre-calls, you talked through hiring solutions, right? Like people are looking to hire a solution versus, just putting bodies in a seat now. Talk about what that looks like for you.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think, and you see it in our verbiage too on the site. Every agent, to use them, you hire them, right? They each have a cost. That's just one credit. Everybody gets 100 credits, and before signing up, and if you run out of them for now, you just get more. But eventually, there's some kind of incentive system there, and some type of whether it's per credit or more likely, we believe to be per outcome type of fee structure. Where our incentives are fully aligned. And when we say we and our, we mean the builders' incentives and the users' incentives, right? If you want to get the absolute best customer service agent, an AI customer service rep, you want them to be as good as possible. But what does that mean? It means resolving the customer's issues as fast as possible, with the highest customer satisfaction rating, right? And the nicest voice and the nicest sort of, conversation back and forth, but ultimately getting real work done and saying, you know what, I walked away from this interaction getting everything that I needed. And I'm fully satisfied, and I can trust that in the future, I would want to interact more with that kind of AI agent or AI worker, versus something else. And that's really what we're trying to optimize for. And again, I think we need to build the right kind of incentives there that are optimizing for the outcomes, not just access, not just one more tool that you could use, that you might use, that may or may not create any value. No, it should really be axated around you know accomplishing something succinct, accomplishing a goal, which again in this case is very easy to measure. In other cases, it's not, right? It's not maybe quite as straightforward as what is your customer rating after the call, and did we complete the request that you had, with to your satisfaction, right? Something along those lines. And again, I think that language itself and how we sort of score it, is very much doable, with all the natural language processing advancements that we've seen. But I do believe, again, I think today most systems are fixed fee. You pay your $10 or $20 a month, you get access to the tools, and you can do whatever with them, or some combination of credits. You buy a certain number of credits if you're a really heavy user and doing some kind of automation, some kind of bulk kind of processing. Okay, fine. Maybe unlimited doesn't make sense in that case because
Yeah,
there's
you'd
real
get
caps
killed on your
versus
own
goals.
API calls, right?
That's right, right. You want to 100 million API calls? Okay, you may incur some costs. But ultimately, if that just leads to one call, that was completed to someone's satisfaction versus not, using all those API calls and all those credits doesn't make sense. Doesn't make
Yeah.
economic sense. Doesn't make business sense. To kind of build those kind of systems and structure in that way. And I also think by thinking about it from a, what are we accomplishing as a business perspective, we're going to, really align both people and AI and the broader business to, measures are already there. I think in most of these cases, people are not just getting hired, to have people in seats. Just like you wouldn't have AI just to have AI in virtual seats. You would hire them to do a job and to do it well and to help them get better. That's it.
Yeah, I think
I have
we're at
more of
this.
like a I have more of like a personal question just as I'm listening to you talk about like building this company. I know it's building something from the ground up is a lot of work, a lot of time. And I think you mentioned in an example that you're a dog lover, so you may have a dog, and it sounds like you have a toddler, you have a family, right? So how is it balancing, building this big thing, this company with your normal life and your everyday life? And what advice would you give to somebody who maybe is struggling there?
Yeah, I would say, first of all, it's always challenging, right? And you have to make some tough choices. You have to set boundaries for work. You have to make, time for family first and foremost. And on top of that, doing school as well. I'm just, I just like to punish myself. But I think in all seriousness, I think, the one of the great benefits of uh, working on Agent.AI and having someone like Dharmesh back it is that, we're able to build this and structure it in a way where we can get real work done ourselves. The whole team is async. We get to plan how we use our time. We have a minimal number of meetings. It's all about, we have, I think, one weekly meeting
Mm.
as sort of the whole group, and that's it. Everything else is synchronous. Prepping for the meeting, for example, keeping people up to speed. That's all async using Slack and Coda for our wiki and things like that. I think it's just being very judicious in your time and saying, you know what, we're going to accomplish certain things. Here's a time for, this part of, what I need to accomplish, which is, architecting some new solution, for our orchestration layer, right? And working on that as an architect and hands on with the developers and spending time code reviewing and pushing things out to production and then talking to the builders. Everything for me is very regimented in terms of, here's my time slot for this. But within that, I just, it's more open ended in terms of exactly, what I need to do to sort of
Mm.
accomplish that goal. And then I also, for me, also just planning the whole week out in terms of the goals and how they align to what are we trying to accomplish this month and this quarter, both from our personal and sort of life outside of work and sort of personal life. I have goals for all of it, and I'm always kind of road mapping and thinking, okay, are we on track? Am I focusing on the right things? Going forward, that I focused on the right things last week, and really just being honest with yourself and saying, you know what, maybe we need to readjust this and set some specific time to accomplish something versus sort of an open-ended, day where you're just working on whatever comes up,
Mm.
which is never, you know, I think the right approach, because more things come up than you can ever handle, and then you're putting things off and so on. Especially when you have a toddler and school, and they get sick and everything. Things
Yeah.
always come up, and you have to drop things and go deal with it, right? So, leaving some level of time for some of that entropy that just part of uh, you know. Uh, having a family and having a dog and everything else like that. I run every day. I set time aside around lunch or in the evening to do my runs, to do the workouts. Again, I think it's important to have that full balance to say, you know what, I need this. I need
Yeah.
to stay healthy. I need to like stay grounded, and that's just part of making time for it and say, you know what, this is that time for that. Other meetings, maybe if you have meetings that come up, we can reschedule, we can move them to the right time. And that's it, right? And just being very judicious with that extended task list. But again, looking at it and planning it every week, for me has been extremely helpful.
Is that something that you've sort of honed over time, or is that something that you've maybe had to learn through not having like being as judicious with your time and as regimented with your time? How have you how's that evolved over, the course of your career?
Yeah, no, I would say that's definitely evolved over time. I think that's something that I've always sort of used, some kind of checklist, checklist manifesto, shot out there, some kind of, organized thinking as an engineer. The way I think is always, uh, fairly regimented, maybe a little bit too regimented. And I've learned how to, to create some more space for that randomness. Right. And I think just being more realistic with like, you plan things, but how much can you really get done? And things always take longer than you think they do anyways. And over time, as an engineering leader, both being hands-on and then managing, teams, that estimates are just estimates, and it's a best sort of swag at what you think at that point you could do, and it would take to do, but they're always wrong, and it's just a matter of like, how wrong are you, right? Are you off by 20%? Or are you off by 200%? And try to get to that 20%, closer to 20% over time. No guarantees, right? And that, to me, that really sunk in. I said, okay, yeah, no, I'm overestimating what I can do, but I still think we should have a plan. I still think I should have a roadmap for my career, for my health, right, for my family time, and how we're trying to spend our time together, right, to try to be active and do a bunch of things. And again, over time, I've just honed it a little bit more and more to say, okay, now my planning process is a lot better. There's also just giving yourself a bit more grace to kind of fail, to kind of say like, again, great plans look good on paper. Okay. when flu season comes around, part of it, half of it may get thrown away. And that's perfectly fine. That has to be fine. Otherwise, you're not giving yourself the right kind of room to also take, even bigger chances, even bigger risks, that will likely pay off.
Yeah, I think touched on a lot of really good points there. And I think when people see opportunity and then they're optimistic about solving those opportunities, you become a prime victim of Hofstadter's principle, which is that recursive principle of like everything will take longer than you expect. Even when you account for Hofstadter's principle, it's still going to take a little longer. And we're optimistic, like, oh, we're excited at the potential of what we're working on right now, and it's like we can do this in this time frame with this result, and it's like, but like to your point, the flu will come up, or you'll have to do something will come up which will create an interrupt, which makes things a little bit longer, and that multiplies out. But I think having that plan in place and then understanding and giving yourself that level of grace that it's going to be elastic, it's going to expand, and that's okay as long as you're continually moving towards the solution.
Right.
So when you're working on Agent.AI now, what are the big goals over the next 12 months, and how are you pulling in both ends of a platform, right? Like platforms connect producers of value to consumers of value. So how are you getting the people that are going to be the consumers, and how are you getting the creators on board to the platform now?
Right. Yeah. So obviously it's a marketplace. There are these two sides. We're first focusing on the builders. If there are no builders, there will be no marketplace. There will be nothing for them to use. And we don't want to be the sole builders of AI agents. I think today, out of the 60 or so agents that we have on the platform, we as in the Agent.AI internal team, we probably built around 40 of them. So again, we have a few that are external, and that's increasing again, every week. There's actually a very long queue of agents that we just haven't approved yet. But I expect that to be in the hundreds, let's say in the next few weeks, for example. We're building not only the platform for the builders, but also incentives, right? So how do we think about, why would I build an AI agent here versus somewhere else? So it's all about ease of use, ease of building, right? We have a WYSIWYG drag and drop builder. You can even describe what you want, and we have a wizard that'll try to even put that entire agent together by itself. We have a bunch of analytics to help these builders understand, okay, who is actually using my agent? What does it look like? Where is it succeeding? Where is it failing? Rating systems, etc. And we're experimenting with incentive systems to be able to say, okay, great. And now I built a whole bunch of agents. I spent a whole bunch of time. I'm getting users. What's really in it for me, right? And what's in it for me to keep building more, to more and more of these agents that are hopefully creating value for those people. Otherwise, they wouldn't use them beyond maybe some initial sort of novelty. So there, we're again experimenting with a number of incentive systems, and the reason why we're again focusing on the builder incentives is to not create any barriers for the users. We don't want to charge the users. We don't want to say, hey, you have to pay us, $20 a month or $1 a month, or by credit or some other kind of payment system there. We want to make it as seamless as possible for the users. And we're first focusing on the builders. We're saying, okay, what would it take to for you to keep building, right? Is it, obviously there's some kind of monetary component to it. And we're experimenting with, let's say, how do we pay you enough, right? Based on how much usage, let's say, your agent is getting. The more the popular, the better. And with some level of, some kind of formula there in terms of, are they finding it useful, right? In terms of the ratings, to say, okay, the more valuable people are finding it, and the more they interact with it, the more money you're going to make. The more value that's creating for the ecosystem, the more value is obviously creating for every other builder as well. Because here's a good example or good examples of agents, and here's what people are saying about those agents, and how can we use that to help other builders, build even better agents, right, and so on. And so we believe that, and this is the very first phase of it, we're focusing on those builders and building. We're starting with different kinds of builder incentive models, but we believe that's sort of the key. And once we have some optionality there and something that really works, then we'll figure out, okay, what does that look like in terms of the users themselves? And again, is that something that we charge on behalf of the builder now that you're getting maybe more scale, or creating, there's a free version, there's a premium version, right, of the same agent, for example. What does that look like? So again, I think that's going to be part of that natural evolution, and the answer is probably some combination of these two, and likely others. But at the very least, we're saying we have to incentivize the builders. We're going to incentivize them, and on top of that, we're going to also help other builders figure out how to build more of the right thing. Like, what does that look like? What is the kind of the secret sauce of a really great AI agent, and how can we help educate with the community? With all the learning, we're putting together an actual community site with, with resources, educational, for non-technical folks to understand what are the assumptions that go into some of these systems. What are how do these actions really work behind the scenes as they maybe want to do different kinds of things or more advanced things. We're going to give them all the tools to be able to build sort of very simple things where, again, you don't need to be a coder in any way. And if you want to extend that, if you want to integrate further with other systems, what does that need to look like? And again, giving them the confidence that, yes, this is extensible, this can work for my use cases, especially as you grow and as you do more complicated things, if that's part of your journey.
I think what you guys are doing is really fantastic, because not only are you creating the ability for people to create agents, but you're also democratizing the distribution of it, which is a big piece of it. A lot of people that want to create an agent or want to be able to monetize it, they might have a great idea and they can run it in a sandbox. They can run it for them as a user or their team as a users. But when you're trying to say, how do I turn this into a SaaS or even like a micro SaaS, y'all take that platform piece of it and you make people have the ability to actually deploy without saying, okay, well, how does Firebase work? How does user management work? How do I manage payment recurring scheduling? How do I do security audits? Like, you're abstracting that to make it easy so someone can deploy it. Like in the early days of YouTube, when people realized, oh, I have this whole platform to be able to distribute my content, and then I can monetize it back without having to be a production company, without having to have servers. So I think really fascinating model, and it's closing the gap to allow people to deploy use cases. And then the other end, once you've built that, the consumers of those are going to be able to find it and really start solving real life problems beyond, let's make a custom GPT that sounds like Simpsons characters when it gives replies or something like that, something silly that doesn't have any utility beyond the novel.
That's right.
So as we're coming toward the end here, we talked through some of your history, how you got to where you are now. We talked through how you've been building Agent.AI and some of the great use cases you're unlocking there. Talked about what the future is looking like there as it's continuing to grow and develop. And something that Lauren and I talk about, it's like these language models right now, that's the worst it's ever going to be, right? They just
Right.
continually get better over time, which is fascinating. And that statement will probably be true every time we say it, right? You look at like the new Anthropic model, like unbelievable like what they're able to accomplish, and this whole industry is really 24 months old when you think about it. Pretty wild to think about. But looking back through all of it, if you could have dinner with yourself at 18 years old or 25 years old, whatever makes sense for you, what does that conversation look like? What advice do you give that version of you, knowing where you are now?
Yeah, I would say, take bigger risks earlier on, as again, the benefit of hindsight, and saying, don't be afraid to move to a new city. I moved from New York to Boston. Didn't love it at first, but now I do. Right, take those big leaps. You know, work for that startup that you didn't think, especially early on, where you have fewer responsibilities. The risk reward ratio is in your favor. Most startups don't make sense anyways in terms of actual payoff and everything else, and a lot of it's about the learning. Like, how do you actually learn the most? It's not about, yes, maybe the stock will be worth some kind of crazy multiple. Sure, it's highly unlikely. What you're likely going to do is wear a whole bunch of different hats, and get to stretch yourself if that's interesting to you, and take on all sorts of interesting roles within a company in a way that you're not going to be able to do at a Fortune 100 company. It's just you're here's your path, to go from junior to developer to senior to principal, etc. Like, there's a very clear path and like specific things that are expected of you, and highly unlikely to deviate from that, right? I think it gives you that chance to really break out of the pack and break out of the mold early on, and that's what I would say. Just take some of those risks. It's completely fine. No one knows, no one really cares about your failures. You will, but nobody else will.
Yeah.
It's all about how do you position it, how do you market it, how do you sell it, right? And a lot of it has to do with just I think some of the most successful people that I've met, Dharmesh Shah included, took those leaps, right? Didn't have to. You were fine. You could do what you were doing before, and so on. But you know what? Taking those leaps, it's a lot more fun, and you're going to actually be much better off for it, up to a point. And again, I think earlier me versus now, would I take the same kinds of risks now versus earlier? Not as many, but I still take them. Will I in 10, 15 years? Most likely not, right? And so it's just a question of where are you on that continuum and that kind of spectrum of taking risks and learning versus you need some more stability, right? You're not going to be able to really uproot your entire life, as much as you are able to. So I think it's finding that right balance, but I would say definitely take more risks early on, figure out what you want to do and who you really are, because early on you have some idea, but you don't really know.
That advice reminds me of when I would chat with like seniors in college who are like, I want to be in marketing, I want to be in advertising because that's my background, and they always wanted to work at the big companies, right? And I said, yes, like that's the sexy dream that you have coming out of school. But my advice was always to work on the agency side at a small to mid-sized company for the same reason that you say to work at a startup, where it's like the money's not going to be there. You'll probably work until you like fall on the floor and realize it's like 10:30 at night and why are you still at work, but you get to wear a bunch of different hats and you get to figure out what you actually like rather than just being another cog or just doing that one task. And so you just get all of this exposure that you wouldn't get otherwise. And so I think it's great advice. The last question that we like to end on is, what are you listening to? What podcasts, what books are you reading? Maybe when you're on your run, what's in
Yeah.
your AirPods? What's
Yeah.
on your playlist?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, podcast wise, a lot of them are just sort of AI sort of podcasts. Data Skeptic, for example, it's my sort of weekly kind of guilty pleasure. Eye on AI, with Craig Smith, from the New York Times is also a big one. Hard Fork is another one, and Me, Myself, and AI. That's another one. So again, from the MIT Sloan folks. They're mostly like these kinds of podcasts leaning a little bit more technical, and then most of my the books that I listen to are these days are just using Notebook LM and trying to come up with my own podcast, right? For different kind of source material, which has been a super fascinating kind of twist. Notebook LM, folks haven't used it, is obviously a Google tool where you can put in files. You can put in other books, for example, and then you could have it create a podcast for you based on that content. You can make it short, you can make it long. And that I use that a lot for a lot of my MBA sort of readings, for case studies and such. So to actually listen, even listening to the sort of the official read version of it versus a podcast with two people on it, and they're actually talking about every single topic. I find myself just memorizing that and really learning it at a deeper level. And then I go back and say, wait a minute, you know, what do I really think about it, right? If I were that person on that podcast, kind of having that conversation about that topic, what does that look like? So I know it's a little bit meta, like talking about it, as we're talking about it on a podcast, but to me, that's super interesting, right? I think it just
Yeah.
kind of points out to how it's enabling all sorts of different interaction modes that, a year ago, like that would not be a thing, right?
Mm-mm.
Like, you just have your own personal podcast based on whatever things you're trying to read and have it like expressly tailored to your tastes and needs. I mean, that's interesting.
Yeah.
That's
It's brilliant.
crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good use case for the tools too. Like I think people more and more are going to have to do that because there's so much information to consume. Finding unique ways to be able to consume it, get the digest, get the high bullet points out of it, and see where you want to click in to go deeper. I think it's the only way to really survive. It's my sister is a senior at Michigan State University right now, and it's amazing to think what they're able to do with these AI tools because like all their books are digital too. Like a lot of her books are PDFs. So what's the first thing you do? You go into Notebook LM or Chat GPT, you create a GPT, you load that book into the knowledge base, and then you go chapter by chapter, and you can even have it give you sample quizzes and tests and stuff, which is
Right.
fascinating, right? Like that level of being able to study and then some people will look at it and be like, oh, it's kind of cheating. And it's like, no, that's smart. It's using the tools available to you to make
Yeah.
your recall better. I think that's an amazing use case.
Yeah, and maybe not seeing or reading the content you already know, and focus on the parts that you're having some struggles with. Like focus
Yeah.
on actually getting better, not just again wasting your time.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think that's probably a good spot to wrap up. And Andre, it was really fascinating hearing your story. Really excited to see what you're doing with Agent.AI. It's again topic that's close to our hearts because building things the hard way, bespoke for each client, is probably there's a small window where we're going to have to do that before we can use the more tools, get better Lego bricks, and stack together better solutions in reduced time to get better outcomes. But we're really excited to see what y'all work on. We're really excited to see the direction. And thank you so much for joining. Oh, before we go, where can people find you?
Yeah, folks can find me on Agent.AI. We have a directory of builders. So I'm on there first and foremost, but also at Oprisan.com or Andre at Agent.AI. So reach out if you want to get builder access. We're letting folks in as a slow trickle, but if you're listening to this, obviously we'll give you priority and get you in right away. And again, thank you again for having me on today. Had a lot of fun talking about what I nerd out about every day. To me, this is like super super exciting, and hopefully it is for some of you as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Andre. Really appreciate it.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.